Welcome back to Living Locally. Many of us are experiencing the mixed emotions of excitement and anxiety as we transition back to the office from working at home. As we deal with a range of concerns, it may be challenging to take on a new normal. Today we're getting some expert advice on how to prioritize mental health during the shift. Joining us via Zoom is licensed mental health counselor Alexandra Skinner-Walsh with the M.A.D therapy. Alexandra, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Of course, thanks for having me.
So what are some common emotions that are arising as people transition back to work, and where do you think these emotions are coming from?
Great question. I think a lot of people are struggling with high levels of anxiety, uncertainty, feeling like we don't have any control over anything. We're just kind of being thrown back in and we're not sure what to expect. And I think that's really the big source of it, is the unpredictability of it all. Because while we may be returning to the work that we were doing before, it is all completely different in terms of standards or what we're new aspects to a job that we didn't have to do before, like cleaning and sterilizing. And so there's this whole different structure, and we're having to adjust to a whole new normal, which is hard then because we put these expectations on ourselves that it should be easy because we're just going back to the way things were, when really it's a whole new thing.
Absolutely. I know for many people it's like you transition to working from home. That was a transition in itself, and now coming back, and like you said, it's not exactly like it was before. How do you think that these emotions might impact employees who are returning to the office?
Yeah, so in various ways. Some people are actually struggling with some grief, because while it was hard to transition home and it had its own struggles, there were a lot of positive things in it. And so for some of us, it is bad to return back to the office. And so some of us are going through some of those motions. For a lot of us, the anxiety can be really overwhelming, and that seems to be the key piece of it all in terms of going back into the workforce.
Now, Alexandra, being aware of these emotions is a great first step. What can we do beyond that to manage these emotions?
I think something that can be really helpful is to get back to the basics. In a time like this where things are really unpredictable and overwhelming and uncertain, getting back to the day-to-day things like nutrition, sleep, our habits or our routines, making sure we're building in time for self-care, making sure we're building in time for family, friends, whatever it is that fuels you or recharges you is going to be really important. And I think also planning for how to prepare for the workday. Even if it's something as simple as laying out your clothes, it makes that morning easier for you, especially when emotions are higher than ever, to just go through the motions to get there and get through the day, and then being able to manage that anxiety in the moment by having those conversations with your employers, being open and honest that this is a hard transition. Most employers are understanding that this is difficult and are likely willing to work with you on how to help you transition back. If that means sitting down and having conversations about what to expect, hopefully they're doing that already. But if they're not asking for that, don't be afraid to ask for the help and support that you need from families, friends, and employers too.
Yeah, those are some great tips for people to be proactive as they kind of deal with those extra emotions coming back to work. And you mentioned that employers can be open and understanding with employees. Is there anything else that you would suggest employers to do to help the mental health of their employees?
If they can help, some employees have been really fortunate in the sense that they've been able to kind of phase people back into the work environment rather than kind of throwing everyone back in at the same time and saying like, good luck, hope you get there. I think a lot of employees are also having a lot of success with being able to have like meetings or conferences in advance, and definitely like largely in advance, a week even, in turn to discuss what to expect. What are the new policies? What is the new gear? What are the new chores, activities, sanitary things that we're having to do now as a company in order to ensure the safety of everyone. And a lot of times that brings a lot of peace to people too, knowing that here's all these things that I'm doing to keep myself safe, and here's all these things my company is doing to keep us safe, even though it's a little anxiety provoking nonetheless.
Now, Alexandra, in addition to all the circumstances surrounding the pandemic, the civil unrest that followed, of course, caused a lot of emotional disruption for a lot of folks. In your opinion, how do you think that protests and riots can impact our mental health?
So a lot of times when we're talking about protests and riots, they definitely into mental health and the emotions and the experiences we're having. There's also, it's really just the tip of the iceberg that what we're touching on in therapy. Really what we're needing to work through in therapy, because that's what we do. We work through things rather than around or avoiding, is the racial inequality that has been in our country for centuries. And the protests are an added layer to that. And so being able to work through the our American history and the part that we have played in it, or the role that we've had in it, or how it's impacted us, has been really helpful in therapy, and to work through some of those emotions that are coming out of the protest and the awareness of what's going on in our country, such as grief and anger and confusion and guilt and pain, can be really, really helpful in addressing some of these mental health concerns, because they do play an impact on us in some way or another. I have yet to meet somebody that isn't impacted by what is going on, and it's being able to find the space to work through it and to heal.
Absolutely. I think that's why it's so important to reach out for professional help that I know you offer at the M.A.D Therapy. How do you begin to counsel folks who are really struggling with the impacts of civil discord in our country?
Sure. I think it's a little different based on the person. When we're talking about white people in therapy, a lot of times what we're doing in therapy is talking about privilege and talking about maybe some of the guilt or the confusion or the anger that comes from everything that is going on. When we're talking about indigenous or Black communities or people of color, we're talking a lot about the trauma that they've experienced, either directly or through generational trauma, right? There's this thing that happens that for centuries, especially if we're talking about the Black community, that there has been trauma happening over and over and over again, and yet there's been no time to heal. It's one trauma after another, and so it's been passed down from generation to generation. And in therapy, we're really needing to work through that and process through that, and the impact of the generational trauma as well as the current trauma that's going on, and provide space to begin to heal all of that.
Right, and that's why I think it is so important to meet with a counselor who has the experience to walk someone through and unpack that and really go through that process. Well, Alexandra, thank you very much for taking the time with us today. We appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. All right, you guys, if you would like some more information, you can visit themadtherapy.com. We'll also have those details posted on ourquadcities.com. More Living Local continues after the break. Stay with us.